Hi, dear listeners, and welcome back to Blush and Bloom, the podcast where we talk about women's health, self care, and everything in between. I'm your host, Gigi, founder of Asale, your space for cycle aware and preventive care. I'm really glad you're here with me on this journey to unpack women's health and highlight the incredible things being built in this space. So let's get into today's episode. All right. Hi, Lara. Thank you so much for joining me on the Blush and Bloom podcast. So, for those meeting you for the first time, how do you introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks for having me. Well, my name's Lara. I'm the founder of Hoopsy. And at Hoopsy, we're on a mission to eliminate plastic from diagnostic tests. So that's things like pregnancy, ovulation, COVID tests. So we're starting with the pregnancy test, and we're currently working on a totally plastic-free test, which we hope to launch next year.
Okay, that's really exciting. Okay. So what basically led you to building Hoopsy? Was there a particular situation that happened?
Yeah, so in 2021, I went through IVF to try and conceive, and I joined lots of online Facebook groups and chats, and I kept seeing people post up pictures of their pregnancy test results, and they were using sometimes 10, 15 tests each cycle, and I just was like blown away. I never really thought about it, but seeing pictures of like 10 or 15 tests in a row, I just thought, why are they plastic? They're literally using them for 5 minutes, and it just seems madness. Unfortunately, my IVF didn't work, but I just couldn't get this image out of my head. And I really felt someone needed to do something, because I felt it was a bit like the straw situation where everyone goes, oh, it's only one. But when there's millions of people using only one or more than one, then it creates a huge amount of waste for something that really doesn't need to be plastic. So I just thought, someone needs to do something. Stuff it. Why not me? And started. Yeah.
That makes sense. I'm sorry to hear about the IVF. I hope everything turns out great. So it's really cool that you're able to like pivot this into building something out that's very, very important, because plastic waste is never a good thing. But something I did find interesting is how like there is use of plastic in Europe and the US. But in Nigeria, I don't know about other African countries, but in Nigeria, it's usually like a paper strip, which is why I was like really interested in speaking with you, because I don't understand where the plastic comes from, or maybe they give paper because paper is cheaper for African countries or something. So this is very interesting to me.
So there's different types of tests. So you've got midstream tests, ones that you wee on. They have a hard plastic case normally,
Okay.
and inside that hard plastic case is the tiny strip that you'd have seen in Nigeria. Those are strip
Yeah.
tests. And so normally then you wee in a cup and you dip the test in, but they've still got around 40% plastic in them. Even though it looks like paper, there's normally, yeah, it's obviously very small, and obviously
Yeah.
therefore the amount of plastic is tiny in terms of grams, but it's still plastic in there. And the reason they do that is because the strips in places like Africa is because the plastic is perceived to look more expensive and higher value, and that's why they sell those in like the UK and the US and Europe.
That's very interesting. So why is it important to you to like merge fertility care with sustainability?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. I mean, first up, when you're using any plastics that go into landfill take over 30 years to break down, and then they turn into microplastics. Then those microplastics go into the food, go into the water, go into the air, and go into us. I mean, most plastics have been found in breast milk. They've been found in babies, like so before they're born. So basically, it affects your health as a woman, and it affects everyone's health. So it's kind of this circle. And I think that the other thing is with fertility is that when you're obviously trying for a baby, you kind of then start thinking like, what world am I bringing this baby into? And then you kind of go, it's, all this pollution, all this stuff going on. So it kind of makes you start to think about how you consume a bit more. And so I think it's kind of it can be for a lot of people, a bit of a turning point in terms of, I want to bring up my child in a better world. Therefore, I am going to stop using whatever plastics. I'm going to try and cut down on how I consume and things like that. So it's kind of those 2 points in terms of the impact it has on fertility.
Okay, that's really impressive. And I love that you're so forward thinking in your approach to this. So, what has the process been like so far with finding a manufacturer and making the test that's 99% paper?
So that one was really easy. I found a manufacturer in China, and they developed the test for me, and we started selling it within 6 months. So they already had regulatory approval, so I didn't have to do any regulatory approval stuff. But now we're working on 100% plastic-free test, and that in the US, and we need to do regulatory approval for that, and that's a lot more complicated because current manufacturers don't necessarily want to change the way that they are manufacturing. They don't want necessarily want to use different materials because it's much easier to do things the way they always did them. So we are currently evaluating who we go with in terms of manufacturer, but yeah, it's finding someone that really believes in what we're trying to achieve as well as has the capabilities to do it.
Okay, that's really. I was actually going to ask you like how you went through like the approval, but it's great that the company already has this approval, which is very very impressive. And this is very good. Okay, so for the lateral test industry, it's worth over 40 billion pounds. What's it like so far for you to disrupt something that's this big and obviously doesn't want to change?
It's hard because basically it's like it comes back to what I was saying about the straws. It's like it's only one, it's not a big problem. It's kind of the attitude of people. When you look at it compared with other challenges in the world in terms of environmental climate type issues, yes, it is quite small, but it's not about the size of the issue. It's about our mindset. And if we don't, as society, don't start to change the way that we think, the way that we act, the way that we buy, that we are not going to, things are just going to change. It's going to be too difficult to like, you know, in years to come, the planet will have even more problems than it does now. So I think it it's a mindset as well as a actual about the products. And then the other thing is that one thing I'm hoping that we can show through doing this is that to improve a product, you don't need to add to it. You can actually take away. And so you can make something simpler and it actually can do a better job than something more complicated. Because often I think people want to do, you know, want to improve things and start to add all these bells and whistles, which actually you don't need. And so it's kind of getting people to start to think about products differently as well. It's kind of something that I really want to, and we've done, like, we're just doing quite a lot of work with that. Like, we're just about to be in a exhibition in Melbourne, Australia about changing product design and things. We've been featured in a university in the US about product design. So I think it's about sustainability, but it's also about thinking about the way we actually design products and how we think.
Okay, that's very interesting, and it's awesome that you get to like all this recognition about your work, which is really really cool. So, how has the market so far responded to the idea of creating eco-friendly pregnancy tests?
The UK has been quite challenging. So we're not currently selling there. We're focusing on the US market, which seems to be much more open to it. I'm in the US at the moment. I've been here about 4 months, and I've found that people basically say if it's the same product, if it works the same, it's the same price, then yeah, we'll swap because it's easy. Because we're not doing anything like it's new, but it's not a new way of doing things. It's the same way of doing things, just different materials. So I'm really positive that we'll start to make an impact over once we launch in the US next year.
Okay, that's really exciting. All right, so what has been the hardest part about bringing Hoopsy from idea to reality so far?
There's quite a lot of hard parts, but I think probably when I started Hoopsy, I'd never worked in medical. I didn't have a background in diagnostic tests. I didn't know really much about them. I'm not a chemist. So that's been challenging learning the industry. And now the big challenge that I'm going through at the moment is the FDA approval process in understanding that because there's not like a how to get FDA approval for dummies
Yeah.
guide or anything. You have to, and there's very few people that have been through all the steps. You have to kind of talk to each person and then you have to put together the process yourself. So that's been challenging. And I think one of the big things is that in healthcare things move quite slowly and there's so many steps to go through and it can get really frustrating. You're just like, seriously, how can it take so long? We're just filling in a form, but it still manages to drag on. So that's probably one of the I'm quite impatient and I think that's one of my personal challenges as well.
All right. That's yeah, I've learned that the FDA process is very rigorous, very long, very lots of time involved in it for anything to pass. So fingers crossed that you're able to like navigate the whole thing because I hear it's a lot. So What are some other areas in women's health where you think we should be seeing more of a sustainability perspective become a bigger focus there?
Well, I mean, I think there's so many places, not just in women's health, but in health in general. Like, why are we still using blister packs? Why aren't we using something else to put medicine in, like put tablets in that is more sustainable? Like, there's lots of things now that we could use that would, like different kind of maybe a paper pouch, things like that we could be doing. I think there's just so much single use waste in health, full stop. And I think it's looking at what's actually being used and then why do we have to keep doing it that way. Like, for example, strip tests, everyone, when you buy a strip test pack of strip tests, they come with a cup, plastic cup. Well, you don't really need a plastic cup every time. And there's a lot of things that I think we've become a very disposable society, and that's part of the issue, is that people are selling things because that basically break or don't last very long so that they have to buy another one. And I think that's the biggest problem. And that's probably one of the things we need to address. Looking at products, looking at how they're used. I mean, and some of it is ridiculous. I mean, this was a while ago, but I went to get blood drawn, and there's elastic things they put around your arm. They were throwing them
Yeah,
away after each person. And I was just like, they're not contaminated. There's really nothing someone is going to catch off that because they're putting it around your clothes. Um, and so just things like that, I just feel like there's a lot of things we need to look at. I don't know if there's one thing in particular. Tablets really stand out to me just because there's so many vitamins and things like that that come out, and just we go through so many blister packs and bottles and things. It's just crazy. But yeah, I think everything we could move slightly more towards that sustainability angle if you just looked at it and thought, well, and even just things around where things are sourced. I mean, like, one thing we're doing with our current test that we're working on is we're manufacturing in the US. And that's because we're selling in the US. And the plan is that then things don't have to travel as far to get here. So it's not just looking at the end product and what it's served in, but actually, how does it get to be in the end product? So there's a lots of different parts of it that, and even if we can just change everything a little bit, that does make a huge difference. And it's just, but you've just got to make the effort. And it's very easy to stay in the status quo and to do things the way we've always done them. And yeah, that's the challenge.
does give me a lot of things to think about. Um, Hearing this. I believe your Hoopsy's mission goes beyond pregnancy tests. So where do you see Hoopsy implementing sustainability for other applications in the future?
Well, we're focusing on diagnostic tests. So starting with pregnancy, because I went through the IVF, then we're looking at ovulation, then potentially COVID tests and other tests in that women's health space, looking at STI testing. We're not entirely sure what our next product will be, and we're still working through that and working out what's the best product to move forward with. We've got an opportunity in medical, we've got opportunity in veterinary, we've got food testing, and we've got environmental testing.
Mm.
So it may not be that we do all that, but we may be able to license our technology. So we're looking at different ways that we can make an impact. And I think there's two ways we can make an impact. One, through our physical products that we produce, but then secondly, through talking about it and being a thought leader in this space to make other people think about what they're doing and what they're using. Because I know that a lot of people I speak to about this, they're like, I hadn't even thought about it. And it's like, yeah, most people, that's the thing, you just say, oh, well, that's just what it is, and I just use it. I think that's a really important part of our mission, is to actually educate and just bring things to people's attentions. Because if you haven't thought about it, you're never going to change it. So,
That makes sense. Yeah.
mm,
Someone who doesn't really like question anything in first place, why would they see the reason to change it? But that's
exactly. Yeah.
okay. So you've spoken openly about your fertility journey. So why is this important to you to bring this level of honesty to your work?
I think that particularly with fertility, it's still seen as very much the woman's problem. And
Yeah.
we know that it's not, because it takes an egg and a sperm to get pregnant. And I think that there's still a lot of stigma attached to, I couldn't have a baby. And there's still a lot of people. It's a bit like that whole, what you see on Instagram is, it's so easy, la la la. I just sneezed and I got pregnant kind of rubbish. And it's And I think that a lot of people, there's so many people that aren't like that. And so we really need to help those people that aren't like that to understand that that is not the normal. The norm, it's, there's lots of different kinds of normal and not everyone is the same. And just because you can't have a baby for whatever reason it is, doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It's just, unfortunately, sometimes the way it goes. And I think that it's important that people understand that it's not them. It's not anything particularly they've necessarily done or not done. A lot of it is actually explainable or due to other things like endometriosis, which, is very hard to cure and very hard to get identified as well. And I think it's important that people basically know they're not alone. And whenever I talk to people about it, they always have a story and people want to be heard and want to know that there's someone that cares and that it's not it's not them. And it's really and it's not always easy. And I think often in society we're very it's very like, just do this quick fix and you're gonna be, like weight loss is one of those areas as well where, you've got to be thin, you've got to be thin, and just do this and in 4 weeks you'll be like a size 8 or whatever. And yet that doesn't work for everyone. And just we need to be more compassionate around those people that don't conform into what society thinks is the normal, because it's not. There isn't a normal, that everyone's different. And I think there's a lot of women still get kind of, when it comes to fertility, feel the pressure is on them as opposed to the guy, if there is a guy in there, if it's a heterosexual relationship. And that's not always true either. And I think we're starting to see more guys realize that, it's not just, it's the woman. It can be either the woman or the man. It's not necessarily always the woman.
Mm.
Um, and I just think it's just something we need to raise awareness of.
That was thank you so much for sharing that. And I think like 2 other episodes I've recorded where it's also sharing this, reminding women that they're not the only one, they're not alone with whatever they're facing. So it's really cool that you're bringing your experience into your work and also sharing that it's not always a one size fits all when it comes to fertility and everything. So thank you so much for
Mhm.
sharing that. Okay, you've run the reports, the pregnancy pause reports with hundreds of women. So what has that taught you about women's experiences and mental health while trying to conceive?
So much. Well, I mean, from things like, on average, on average, a woman uses 3 pregnancy tests every time they check if they're pregnant because they want to be doubly, triply sure, to the fact that most women take a pregnancy test at work, but then people have taken them in the nightclub toilets before they start drinking to check they're not pregnant. So you've got there's so many different things we've learned about. And then yeah, so you want to make sure you're pregnant before you start drinking on a night out.
I think I'm even more baffled about The Office.
The office, well, I think it's just because we spend so much time at work.
But
So yeah. I think we've also learned a lot about like sex rather than being something fun and enjoyable becomes a bit of a chore when you feel like you're just doing it with this end goal in mind. And so it can become a real mental hurdle. And it becomes like, right, okay, it's Tuesday, I've got to do it because this is what my cycle says. Or like, I've just started ovulating, right, come on, we've got to have sex. And I think so rather than, if people have been trying for a while and it's not really happening, that's what they feel like. It's just really becomes a mental chore. It's not just something that will happen. And that then becomes more like work than actual pleasure because you're just trying to do it with one. Rather than normally with sex, I think the goal is just to have a good time. Whereas when you're trying for a baby, the goal is to have a baby and to get pregnant. And so you're just women put a lot of pressure on themselves to make sure that that happens. And then I think the other thing is that women you get to the stage where it's all about hope and you're just so hoping that something happens that you will cling to anything to make sure that you get that. Like, for example, when you're doing IVF, lots of people say after you've done IVF, you should eat chips because the salt helps the embryo stick. It doesn't make a scrap of difference. But the thing is that my doctors have said it doesn't make any difference. that is an urban myth. And so that is an urban myth that women are like, well, okay, what's the worst can happen? I eat some chips. The best thing can happen is to actually get pregnant after the transfer. So you kind of like, I will do anything, even if it is kind of crazy, to try and make it happen. I think that's is just you realize how much hope, and I guess in some ways it could be seen as desperation, or just like people just so want this, and it can be really hard to get.
This is a the conversation is a lot more emotionally intense than okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it also reminds me of the conversation I had from my previous episode with Jessica Mendes. She works with around IVF, and she was mentioned something along the lines of women should also understand that IVF is not like the be all solution, that it's just one of many options that they can try, and they shouldn't be too hard on themselves when trying. So thank you so much for sharing this. So let's say like there is a woman who's listening to this podcast right now who's on her own fertility journey. Like from your experience, what would you like to share with her?
I would say, like, I think one of the most important things which I regretted not doing early on in my journey is doing more research about what the odds are and what the chances are and how things work. Because the doctors will often tell you the statistics, but they're not often correct for you as a person, because often their statistics in their clinic are based on the people they accept into their clinic. So rather than saying it's the general population and not we half of the people that come here get pregnant, it's not the general population. It's based on women of a certain age with a certain BMI, with a certain situation. So I think it's important that you do some research around your situation and work out if what they're telling you is right for you, because otherwise it can really lead to false hope. And I think, like, for example, in my situation, when I did my egg harvesting, nobody told me that you're basically you need to start like eating well and exercising and all that kind of stuff at least 3 months, ideally a year, before you do an egg harvest. And so I just thought, just live life like normal and then just rock up to the egg harvesting. But no, what you eat, that all affects your eggs. And from up to a year before those eggs actually appear. So just things like that, looking into what else you could do to improve your chances, because often things actually are quite small. It might just be like, for example, your BMI plays a massive part if you're trying to conceive naturally. And so you really want to try and, if you do have a high BMI, you really want to try and get it down, because it just increases your chances of getting pregnant. But and if you can exercise more, then do that. And even if it's something minor, like just getting out for an extra 10-minute walk a day, all of that will make a difference. So I think it's really about looking at your situation, doing some research online from credible places, and actually finding out more about how will work for you, not just the general population.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that was very insightful. So if you could design, say, like the ideal future of fertility care, what would that look like from your perspective?
For the ideal fertility care, well, I don't think you should be paying as much as you pay. I think clinics it's become basically it's become something only the rich or people that are willing to go into a lot of debt can afford, because the prices they charge are just crazy. It's become very much like the weight loss industry, where they're just selling hope. And so I really think it needs to be far more regulated. We need to have far more accountability and far more uh, people really need to understand more about how it works. I think also we need to do a lot more education in schools. Realistically, most people get taught sex ed when they're 13, maybe 14. And by the time you actually get to the stage when you're ready to have babies, which for women on average, they're having babies about 27, you can't remember back then what happened. So we need more education around how it works, because lots of women don't actually understand how it works. And you just remember that thing of don't get pregnant because, don't have a baby at this age because it will ruin your
Yeah.
life. You don't remember much else around that. I think there needs to be a lot more education in this space as well, to really, so that people know about their options. Like, one thing that's happening now in fertility is that people are scaremongering younger women into getting their eggs frozen. And I'm not saying you shouldn't get your eggs frozen, but what I'm saying is the industry doesn't know, because egg freezing hasn't been around for long enough. If you freeze your eggs for 10 years, it doesn't know if you're going to actually have any viable ones to use at the end of 10 years. So you're spending all this money now. Say you're 21, 22, you're spending this money. You probably aren't going to have children until your 30s. And then will actually any of those eggs be any use? And so I feel like there's a lot of stuff like that going on, and people don't really talk about it because people don't necessarily know. The clinic is you think you're talking to a doctor, you think you are, and you think that they know the best thing for you. But actually, a lot of these clinics now have quotas, as in, we need to have, like, you need to get 5 people to freeze their eggs this month or whatever it is. And it's all money making. And I think that a lot of that needs to change. I don't think it will, but because people are making too much money from it. But I think there needs to be more regulation around that, or more awareness and more education.
That makes sense. Thank you so much. And I think one of the awesome things about like having this podcast is understanding that like there are other women also within this fertility space who have also taken it upon themselves for whatever region that they're in the UK or in Thailand, and then they're educating women on what are the best practices within the region you're in. How can you access this? What are your options? How can you access them? So I think with so far what I've observed from femtech, I think there's hope for the generation coming after yet, because I think more women are becoming more aware of what they ought to know that they don't typically wouldn't. Who knows? Maybe. And then I think another interesting thing I recently learned was that like when a woman conceives, that I think it's the placenta also that the development of it is the man's doing. I think the general thing was like we thought that everything was the woman, like she has to be healthy, she has to be eating right, she has to be doing everything. But also the man's health also plays a role in how the baby is going to be formed. And I think it's so cool that all this research is being done and we're better understanding that like it's not just the woman's health that's important here. The man's health also plays a role in how her pregnancy is going to be. And I loved reading the comments in the video because it was like, oh, so if a woman is like throwing up a lot, it's the man's fault. I don't know science backing that completely yet, but like it's interesting like seeing how like we have moved from it's only the woman's fault if she can't conceive or she's having a difficult pregnancy to it's a team effort. So everybody should be aware in men, especially around fertility care.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's really important. And they do play a big part.
Okay. Okay, a similar question, kind of like the one I asked before, but different. So for someone who wants to join you on this sustainability for maybe they don't want to do fertility, maybe it's another aspect of health, what would you advise them so far from your experience?
Well, there's lots of quick swaps you can do, or easy swaps. So even just things like if you're going to microwave something, don't microwave it in plastic, because the plastic melts and goes into your food at a basic level. So using like glass Tupperware, glass containers with lids, things like that are a really easy swap. Trying to use things that you can wash, like switching to period undies rather than using tampons and pads, is an easy swap. Even Sorry?
I love period panties now.
Yeah, they're great. They're so easy. I mean, things like when cleaning products, the marketing message is from cleaning companies is you need a bathroom one, a kitchen one, whatever, shower one. You don't. You really just need one product. You don't need all these products. And you can often do things a lot with more natural products, which work just as well, if not better. And it doesn't mean that it's really fiddly and inconvenient. It can still be just as easy. And then even just things like, just rewashing stuff. So like instead of with cleaning cloths, people often use them and then throw them away. Like you don't need to use paper towels. You can use a tea towel, like things like that. Just those little things just to get rid of that disposable society mindset, like always having a water bottle with you or using a water bottle, an aluminium one, rather than buying bottled water and refilling it. It's becoming much more common now to see water refill stations. And even on the airplane, like you can drink your bottle of water before you get on the plane. You can take an empty bottle with you on the plane and the hostesses and stuff will fill it up with water for you. You don't have to use the bottled water on the plane. And just things like if you're going to eat out, like just to get takeaway rather. I mean, you don't need to get the plastic cutlery from the place. You could use your own cutlery at home. Just all those little things just will make a huge difference. So it's just thinking about it's not always as convenient, but often it can be more convenient. And just saying no to plastic bags as well. I mean, obviously in the UK, you now don't, you can take your own shopping bags, but it still amazes me how people are happy to pay for them, the plastic bags. It's like, it's really not that hard to take your own fabric bag with you. So I just think there's a lot of things we can do as a society that would just move the needle. And just if everyone did one of those things every day, it would make a huge difference. I mean, there's 8 billion people on the planet.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing these tips. When you said kitchen towels, I looked at mine. It's just sitting like opposite me. Okay. So many things to swap out. All right. So oh, there was a siren. Anyway, so we're headed towards the end of the podcast, and I've really loved the conversation so far. So, what would you tell 15-year-old Lara?
Oh, this is always a hard one, and it often depends on the mood I'm in at the time. I think one thing is that really your results at school don't really matter. I think one thing is I think the biggest thing, and I feel like I've done this most of my life, is doing something you're passionate about, something you believe in, and doing what you enjoy, and that will lead you to the right things. And I think when you're young, it's very easy to get kind of everyone is doing this certain path, and it's very easy to think that's the path you need to be on. So I think, yeah, about following your passions and doing what you enjoy.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think I share a similar sentiment because I really, really thought that what I studied in school would influence who I would become, but not really. Okay, kind of, maybe a little. So, final question: where is the best place for our listeners to connect with you and learn more about Hoopsy?
Best to go to our website, so hoopsy.com, hoopsy.com. And you can email us from there or contact us via socials from there. And yeah, I'll respond. Not a problem. Love to hear from anyone that has any questions or comments or thoughts.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. I'll also include them in the description and in the show notes as well. So thank you so much, Lara. It's been a pleasure speaking with you and learning so much about your fertility journey and how Hoopsy is doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Record. Hi again. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Blush and Bloom. I'm so glad you joined me for this conversation. If you found it helpful, please share this episode with a friend or someone who might need it. Let's keep talking about women's health and working towards better outcomes for all of us. You can find more episodes and resources at www.accelerator.tech and check out our app at www.accelerator.health. And you can follow us for more updates on Instagram at accelerator.tech. Until next time, I'll see you in the next episode. Take care and bye-bye.